What if I told you that your suffering wasn't just random pain, but a test? A test that, if understood correctly, could lead you to something far greater than relief, transformation. Most people spend their entire lives running from suffering, trying to numb it, avoid it, or deny it. But what if your suffering held the very key to the breakthrough you've been searching for? You're about to discover why Carl Jung believed that suffering was not an obstacle to life, but its very foundation. And by the end of this video, you'll realize that the answer to your deepest struggles has been closer than you ever imagined. First, I'll reveal a psychological trigger Jung uncovered that explains why your suffering is not meaningless but deeply significant, an insight that can completely shift your mindset. Then, I'll introduce a controversial concept that goes against everything society tells you about happiness and why embracing your suffering could be the key to real fulfillment. Finally, I'll share a small but powerful tweak, a perspective shift that has helped countless individuals turn their darkest moments into the most meaningful transformations of their lives. But first, let's talk about why most people get this all wrong. The hidden meaning behind suffering. Carl Jung's perspective on suffering challenges the modern obsession with comfort and effortless happiness. In a world that encourages the avoidance of pain through distractions, entertainment, and material pursuits, Jung saw suffering as something far more profound, a necessary force for psychological and spiritual growth. His statement, "Man needs difficulties, they are necessary for health," suggests that suffering is not just an unfortunate part of life but an essential one. It is through suffering that we are forced to confront our deepest fears, break through illusions, and ultimately evolve into more conscious individuals. Many people view suffering as a mistake, a punishment, or something to be eliminated as quickly as possible. But Jung believed that suffering is a signal, an alarm that something within us is out of alignment. When we feel lost, broken, or in despair, these emotions are not random occurrences but messages from our unconscious mind. They point to unresolved conflicts, suppressed emotions, or ignored aspects of ourselves that demand our attention. However, instead of listening to these signals, most people attempt to silence them through external distractions, whether it's social media, relationships, or material success. Yet, no matter how much we try to run from suffering, it eventually catches up with us. The key to understanding suffering is realizing that the answer does not lie outside of us. True healing and transformation come not from escaping pain but from facing it directly. Jung emphasized that suffering has a purpose. It forces us to go inward, to explore the depths of our psyche, and to integrate the fragmented parts of ourselves. This process, though uncomfortable, is what leads to genuine self-awareness and growth. The real test is not whether we can endure suffering but whether we can use it as a guide toward inner transformation. Imagine a person who experiences deep loneliness. Instead of seeing it as a negative state, they choose to explore its meaning. They ask themselves, why do I feel this way? What does this loneliness reveal about my relationship with myself? Through introspection, they may realize that their loneliness stems not from a lack of external connections but from a disconnection from their own inner world. In this way, suffering becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. Jung's insight reminds us that suffering is not meant to break us, it is meant to awaken us. It is an invitation to discover the truths we have long ignored, and in doing so, it offers us the opportunity to become whole. Why avoiding suffering only makes it worse. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that suffering should be eliminated rather than understood. We live in a world that promotes avoidance, whether through entertainment, consumerism, or quick-fix solutions, so it's no surprise that many try to escape their pain rather than face it. However, Carl Jung warned that whatever we suppress does not disappear, it retreats into the unconscious and gains power over us. He referred to this repressed part of ourselves as the shadow, the hidden aspects of our psyche that, when ignored, manifest in destructive ways. When you deny your suffering, it doesn't vanish, it mutates. It turns into anxiety, depression, and self-sabotaging behaviors. It can show up as chronic dissatisfaction, unhealthy relationships, or a constant feeling of emptiness. The irony is that the more you resist suffering, the more control it has over you. The emotions you suppress today will eventually surface in ways you don't expect, often as unconscious patterns that shape your life without your awareness. This is why avoiding suffering only makes it worse. It forces your pain to express itself in destructive ways. Jung believed that suffering carries a message. It is an inner signal that something within you needs attention. Imagine someone who avoids conflict because they fear rejection. Over the years, they suppress their emotions, constantly adapting to please others. On the surface, they seem fine, but deep inside, they feel disconnected from themselves. They may start experiencing resentment, frustration, or even physical symptoms like fatigue and stress-related illnesses. Then, one day, they realize they no longer know who they truly are. Their suffering was never the enemy, it was a guide, trying to tell them that they needed to reclaim their voice. This applies to all of us. The struggles we avoid often hold the very lessons we need to learn. If we run from suffering, we stay stuck in cycles of unconscious pain, never truly understanding ourselves. But when we stop avoiding suffering and start listening to it, something extraordinary happens. We begin to integrate the parts of ourselves we once rejected. We become whole. Jung's wisdom teaches us that suffering is not something to fear, it is something to explore. When we have the courage to face it, we gain insight, strength, and clarity. The question is not whether you can avoid suffering, the real question is whether you will let it transform you. The surprising power of embracing your suffering. Carl Jung believed that true transformation begins when we stop resisting suffering and start engaging with it. He famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This statement reveals a profound truth: if you do not confront your suffering, it will control you from the shadows. But the moment you shift your perspective and see suffering not as an attack against you but as a force working for you, everything changes. Every story of human resilience, every legend of greatness, is built on suffering. The people who left the greatest impact on history were not those who avoided pain but those who transformed it. From great thinkers and artists to revolutionary leaders, suffering was often the very thing that propelled them to their highest purpose. Why? Because suffering is not an endpoint, it is a doorway. Those who step through it, not as victims but as students, discover strengths and wisdom they never knew they had. Imagine a person who loses everything, a career, a relationship, or a sense of purpose. Initially, the suffering seems unbearable. But instead of numbing the pain or escaping into distractions, they face it head-on. They begin questioning their old beliefs, uncovering hidden parts of themselves, and re-evaluating what truly matters. Over time, they emerge from the darkness, not as the same person, but as someone wiser, stronger, and more self-aware. This is the power of suffering. It strips away illusions, forcing us to grow in ways we never would have chosen voluntarily. Jung's insight teaches us that suffering is not a punishment but an invitation, an opportunity to integrate the parts of ourselves we have neglected. When we resist suffering, we remain trapped in cycles of unconscious pain. But when we embrace it, we unlock an inner transformation that leads to greater self-awareness, resilience, and meaning. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" That simple shift can turn suffering from an unbearable weight into the very thing that sets you free. A simple but powerful perspective shift. There is a single shift in mindset that has the power to transform how you experience suffering. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" This one question can move you from a place of powerlessness to a place of purpose. Because if suffering is a test, then within it lies a hidden lesson, one that has the potential to change you in ways you never expected. Most people see suffering as something unfair, something that should not be happening. But what if suffering is not a punishment but an invitation? What if your loneliness isn't a sign that you are unworthy of connection, but a call to build a deeper relationship with yourself? What if your failures aren't proof of your inadequacy, but lessons in refining your true purpose? What if your heartbreak is not the end of love, but the beginning of understanding what love truly is. Jung believed that suffering holds meaning, but only if we are willing to seek it. The moment you stop resisting suffering and instead ask what it is teaching you, you reclaim your power. You shift from being a victim of circumstances to an active participant in your own transformation. Every hardship, every painful moment, becomes an opportunity for growth, self-awareness, and deeper understanding. When you reframe suffering as a teacher rather than an enemy, you open the door to transformation. Instead of feeling lost, you begin to see patterns. Instead of feeling trapped, you recognize opportunities. Instead of resenting your struggles, you start to see them as necessary steps in your personal evolution. The key is perspective. Pain will shape you no matter what, but whether it breaks you or builds you depends on how you choose to see it. Your answer has been closer than you think. Here's the truth that most people never realize: the answer to your suffering isn't somewhere out there, it's within you. The wisdom you're searching for, the healing you crave, and the meaning you long for have been inside you all along. The problem is that we spend so much time looking outward, seeking validation, searching for distractions, and trying to escape discomfort, that we overlook the one place where real transformation happens, within ourselves. Carl Jung believed that suffering serves a profound purpose: it forces us to look inward. It compels us to integrate the parts of ourselves we've ignored, to confront our deepest fears, and to finally become whole. When you stop fighting your suffering and start listening to it, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see that it was never meant to break you, it was meant to awaken you. Your suffering is not a punishment, nor is it a sign that something has gone wrong. It is a signal, guiding you toward the person you were always meant to become. So now, let me ask you, what if your suffering is not a mistake? What if, instead of being a barrier, it is the very path leading you to clarity, wisdom, and self-discovery? What if everything you have been avoiding is the key to unlocking your greatest transformation? The choice is yours: will you continue running from your suffering, or will you finally turn inward and uncover the answers that have been waiting for you all along? If this message resonated with you, then don't keep it to yourself. Someone else might need to hear it, too. Leave a comment below: what is one lesson suffering has taught you? And if you want more insights like this, subscribe to the Silent Dominion and turn on notifications, because the journey inward is just beginning.